Brand building starts with great writing. Our guest today has created some of the most iconic characters in the history of late-night television. Longtime staff writer for Conan and children's book author, today we meet Brian McCann. Welcome to Deeper Dives. Let's get started. Brian McCann, welcome to Deeper Dives.
Thank you very much. Great to be here. Lovely audience. Hello, folks.
Hello, everyone.
They're very obediently quiet, but I love them.
Our audience here, everyone, just to make Brian at home.
Thank you. Thank you. I need that feedback.
So let's talk about some of your early beginnings. You are well known for some amazing characters you created with the Conan and Brian show.
Thank you.
And, everyone starts from somewhere. And it feels like Chicago is like the epicenter for comedy.
Doesn't it?
It seems like so many people come out of Chicago. Talk to us about some of the early days.
Well, I grew up in the suburbs. And even as a kid, I was very aware of the downtown Chicago comedy scene, especially John Belushi and Second City. Primarily, John Belushi was from the same town I was, which was Wheaton, Illinois. So there was just an awareness of that. And when I was in high school, Blues Brothers was huge, and that was
Definitely.
very much a tribute to Chicago. And so that implanted in me like the desire, like I knew I was going to go away to college, but I knew at the last day of college, I was going to move back to Chicago and I was going to try my best to, dip into the comedy scene. And it's, I'm the trillionth person to talk about Second City and the hold it has on that city and the draw it has. And prior to that, the Compass Players and like Mike Nichols and like all these greats who sort of took the old school of comedy from the 40s and 50s and sort of made it hip and stuff in the 60s and 70s. And a lot of their tricks and styles are still in effect today. And slowly what Second City did sort of leaked into television and film, and now it's everywhere. And I was there with a great crew of people like Chris Farley, I was just talking to someone about. He and I started doing improv at the Improv Olympic and being taught by this guy, Del Close. We started like on the same day. So we were on the same improv team.
So this guy was helping the crew of people that were there to kind of perfect their comedic skills?
Yeah, Del Close is this just guru of comedy. He was the one who basically trained Belushi and Bill Murray and all those guys. They wanted to study with him. He started the Compass Players, and it's a very storied past.
Something I've been fascinated with, because I'm a writer as well, when you're writing for an iconic brand like Conan is,
Sure.
and you're on staff, and it's your job, so to speak, how is that different than when you're maybe more self-motivated to create a children's book as you're doing, and you're your own client and you're your own brand? So is there a difference when you're part of moving a brand forward that is not yours,
Right,
as opposed to when you're flying solo?
there absolutely is. And I will say one of the great things about Conan, I came in at the tail end of his first year, so he was still definitely learning and still defining his brand and his game and figuring out ways to get his voice in, because he was in a way taking over the Letterman brand and the larger NBC talk show brand. So, that's a slow game to morph that into your own voice. But he came from a very, what's that word? Just collaborative world. He came from, working at the Groundlings and then at Saturday Night Live. So he was very comfortable with a lot of different voices in the room. And he was very comfortable with allowing people to have their own voice. And we all sort of learned together to balance your own voice as well as the overall voice of the show. And there were some things that I thought, would kill and that were just so hilarious. And I would arrogantly walk down to rehearsal like, oh boy, do I got one for you today, boss. and it would be cut. And and those were like moments you'd go back and be like, why, what's wrong, what a dick,
Am I really funny?
right? And then it was just like, no, like it doesn't speak to the whole show, and that takes away from what we're all doing as a team. So there was a large learning experience there, and I feel that I've been involved with probably 10, 15 different shows at this point, and that's always a thing that you see not only yourself grapple with, but the rest of the team grapple with. If you're doing a show at MTV, it's different than doing a show at Netflix, and it's different doing a show on just YouTube. And so there's just different cooks and different parts of every kitchen.
And how is it different when you're your own brand now?
I find that tricky as well, because does anyone really know who they are? And so like I love writing for kids. I really do. I have a 5-year-old and I also have a 25-year-old, but there's really nothing greater than watching these little kids grow and just, shape them. And I take it seriously as to what I subject them to and what I can reveal to them. So I really love writing for them. And I've always loved children's literature, and I've always had pretty strong feelings about what works and what doesn't work. But when I sat down to write my own book and my own stories, there's a 1,000 voices in my head that are the editors and that are the judgmental. I still have like voices in my head, which I know belong to judgmental jerks from college and high school that are just in there and just, oh yeah, that's not funny. You're trying too hard there, McCann. And those voices, as much as I try to come to terms with them, still are there. And so it was interesting to write a book, but I took a lot of time, and there was nobody cracking the whip. There was no time restraints, like I hadn't sold the idea, and then I wasn't under a deadline. I had the idea, and then my approach was, let me write something good and then I'll like go sell it. So I didn't want to have that same deadline, which I was so familiar with in television. And so I did it just on my own terms, and I developed like a really nice habit of, each morning, I would kind of, without eating, I would just get up and just go sit down and I would write for 3 hours. And I found that to be my most, creative, sort of fluid moment of the day. And it was fascinating, like in a weird way, because you're kind of analyzing yourself as you're doing it. There is another set of eyes that you have that's watching in a weird way. And I really came to love the story and the characters and the way I was expressing it. And like in my head, because the book I wrote is called Wannabe Farms, and it's all narrated. It's a story that's being told. So there is a narrator telling the story. It doesn't have really talking characters or anything. So in my head, I made it Christopher Walken just because I was like, who would
why not?
I don't know. I was like, what an interesting guy to be telling a kid's story. It's talking about these insane animals that are trying to do stuff. But then there's all these...
Christopher Walken. Yeah, right. There we go.
But then there's all these breaks where, because it's all written in verse, but then there's these breaks. The narrator just kind of turns to the kids and is just like, okay, let's stop here. Like, everyone knows animals are pretty stupid, And so it's just like these real kind of hardcore truth moments where he breaks the narrator character and just talks to the kids.
But aren't you then, in fact, creating your brand as a writer, because you're disrupting the way things are written typically?
That's what the publisher said.
In life and your career, success or failure is, as you're discussing, sometimes the failure is a success. When you look back, it's a series of small and big decisions. Sometimes a small decision can be a big decision. Sometimes your job relocates.
Well, you are bringing up a very sticky time in my life.